I am live. Let me just move this so it really looks like I'm in the center here. Just move it a little bit more. So here we are with another day, another reading from the Science of Mind magazine, The Daily Guides. I think I mentioned before, I like doing these readings. Why? Because it makes sure that I do the readings every day. And I learn something every day, every single day. And even when I completely disagree with the writer, I learn something. I learn something about myself. I learn something about them. And I also get to explore new ways of looking at the world, which is kind of cool. I don't say that I do today. I've got some slightly different opinions on what our writer, Reverend Ryan, says, but by and large, I have no qualms or no objections to what she's writing, but what they are writing about today. I gotta get my pronouns right. The reading is called Resistance is Futile. The first quote is from an interesting character called David Goggins. That's Goggins. Go look him up. He's one of these super athletes. He does wild and wonderful things. For instance, he holds the Guinness World Record for number of pull-ups in a day. He does super endurance events, etc., etc. He's an ex-Navy SEAL and quite an interesting character. Go look him up, David Goggins, Goggins. I don't do any of those things. Well, I do work out a lot, but it's really just I'm not into strength training, as you can probably see, but I am into keeping fit and doing resistance training and also doing cardio training because I think it's important. He says our whole life is set up in the path of least resistance. We don't want to suffer. We don't want to feel discomfort. So the whole time we're living our lives in a very comfortable area. There's no growth in that. And Ernest Holmes in Words That Heal Today on page 22 says, it is only when we view life from the standpoint of an expanding soul, destined forever to exist somewhere, that we can make either sense or sanity out of the human experience. And so that's Ernest Holmes in Words That Heal Today. And Reverend Ryan starts off with, resistance is futile. Of course, that's the title of the reading today. No, I have not been assimilated by the Borg or other alien beings. I'm not what you would call a go-to-the-flow person. Any evidence to the contrary, I am a gripping the side of the boat type of person, as if that may somehow positively influence any type of outcome. Reverend Ryan quotes from the Borg. I would have quoted actually from Doctor Who. If you don't know who Doctor Who is, look it up. Doctor Who. It's a series. It's a science fiction series. It's been around forever on the TV. I remember it when I was a kid, and I grew up with Doctor Who. And his main enemy is a race of beings. They're like mechanical, but they have an animated part to them, but they look like machines from the outside. Doctor Who and the Daleks would say, resistance is futile, human being. And Reverend Ryan goes on to say, I notice this particular phenomenon, especially in times when I step out without knowing exactly what may meet my foot on the other side. Remember Indiana Jones walking over the gap and the bridge coming out? Whether faced with a transition, a change, a call to something new, I think some level of resistance is natural. I agree. This self-protective force often whispers, hey, wait a minute. This might not be safe. This might not be how you think it's going to go. Or, and Ryan says, my favorite, who do you think you can do? Who are you to think you can do or be this? The adventure is to recognize resistance for what it is and then be willing to step out in ways that speak to the truth of who we are and that spark passion within us. This passion has us bursting with expectancy and waking up with excitement at the limitless field of possibilities. So maybe the trick is not to resist resistance, but instead to make friends with it. Maybe those areas where we experience the most resistance are really the areas calling out to us and inviting us to step out in creative and adventurous ways. I have a sneaking suspicion that if we choose to move despite resistance, we may truly be amazed at what is waiting for us on the other side. I think it's human nature, Reverend Ryan's right, it's human nature that when we are attempting something unfamiliar, there's something within us that might hold us back. I thought a lot of people around actually didn't feel that, especially these super athletes. But apparently, if you look at the reading from David Goggins, that's not the case. He says that we're designed for, or our whole life sets up for least resistance. When the pandemic happened, we at Creative Life Spiritual Center decided that we wanted to stay in touch with all of our members. Reverend Lisa and I decided that we would do a daily reading. If you remember back in those days in the 2020s, at least for several weeks, pretty well nobody went anywhere. We may have gone shopping for food and stuff, and some of us didn't. We had it delivered, but we actually went out there and got it. But basically nothing happened in person. I remember lots of meetings online. Even our chamber networking meetings were online, and that was really kind of wacky. Well, we decided that we would do these daily readings, and we were stepping out into the unknown because I had never actually interfaced with Facebook Live before. I hadn't been out and done readings on Facebook Live. I didn't know how it would work. I think now that it ran Lisa, we'd done some stuff, but not much, because almost everything had been in person, and what hadn't been had been on Zoom. And both Reverend Lisa and I were very familiar with Zoom. I'd been through my practice training on Zoom. Reverend Lisa and I both went through our ministerial training for, in my case, 3.5 years, and in Reverend Lisa's case, I think 4 years, maybe 4.5 years. We spent it 60% on Zoom. Some of the stuff was in person in Denver. We stepped out into the unknown. We really didn't know what to expect. And then it just kind of became second nature. And then we decided, how can we get the word out more? And we started using other platforms. And I started using the Streamlabs. And at first it was really hard to get used to. I don't know what was going on. It kept giving me echoes and multiple stuff. Finally figured it out. But the bottom line is that when you have an incentive to do something, it's as if the resistance doesn't matter. And therefore, I think the idea is that if you something that you really need to achieve and you keep your mind focused on that and not what's going on in between, then you'll start making progress and you'll get beyond the barriers. I got a story to tell about, well, it's several years ago now. I don't remember how many, but it's more than 10. My wife and I were in Hawaii on Maui, and we'd gone to this business convention. And as part of it, they were trying to demonstrate to us the idea of keeping your eye on the goal. And the instructor who was running the whole thing used karate as an example. Actually, he used chopping a piece of wood in two with your bare fist as an example. And he had everybody in the whole group do it. Eventually, I think it must have been about 90 or 100 of us. There were quite a lot of us. And eventually, every single person did it. They managed to smash that piece of wood with their bare hand, including a lady from, I think she was from Quebec. She was maybe Montreal. She was from Canada. And she was in a wheelchair. And even she finally managed to do it. And the tree, he told us what the trick was. He showed us the technique to use to actually, hit the board like this. But he also told us what would make us successful and what would prevent us from doing it. He said, what you need to do is to look beyond the board. He had us we each got a piece of wood. It was 2 inches thick and it was about this big. And on the back of the board, we wrote a particular goal that we wanted to achieve. And while we were standing there and going and hitting the board, he said, look beyond the board. Imagine your goal is beyond the board and look beyond the board. And when you look beyond the board and you hit that board with the right technique, it's smashed. It's smashed in two. But the number of people who didn't found out that what had happened was at the last minute, instead of keep looking forward beyond the board, they took their eyes off and they looked at the board. And when they looked at the board and hit it, it didn't break. And the whole idea was to get beyond the resistance by looking at the goal. And that's what comes to my mind when I see this reading here, which is kind of cute. I went to look for an Ernest Holmes affirmation in Science of Mind textbook for this. I couldn't really find one, and I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's necessary every day. However, I think this is a good example of how we often get stuck on looking at the obstacles instead of looking what's beyond the obstacles. I'm sure that when a gardener goes out there, they're looking at the results in their mind and not necessarily getting embroiled in all the day-to-day toil that's necessary to actually bring about those results. And I'm saying that because I've got to get out there in the next day or two and plant some herbs and plant some peppers. And 3 different kinds of peppers and 4 different herbs I'm going to put out there. We have some herbs out there already. Our yard is wild, but we like it that way. The animals like it that way. The birds like it that way. It's kind of cool. With that, the affirmation that Reverend Wayne has given us, it's written down there for you. I think it's too long. I make friends with the resistance, knowing that its presence is an invitation to step out in creative and adventurous ways. I would say I look beyond the resistance as an invitation to step out in creative and adventurous ways. But that's just me. What do you think? I really would appreciate if you do 2 things. One is spread the word about creative life. If you like what we teach and you like in these readings, and you think that we teach some good stuff out there, which I think we do, it's positive, it's upbuilding, it's spiritual probably more than religious, pass the word on. And give us a like on Facebook, and wherever you see it, on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, give us a like. That is kind of cool. And also, if you have a mind to do, we appreciate any contributions that you might make. We're really just trying to increase our audience because we got a positive message to give. It's non-political, it's non-partisan, it's not any religious affiliation, it's not in any way limited to by any differences in people, whether that be religious, racial, sexual, political, whatever. I've got a good message, and we would like you to get it out and give us a like and encourage more people to watch these things, which would be kind of cool. Not to make our heads any bigger, but to actually just get our message out, because it's the message. It's not the messenger. It's the message that matters. And Reverend Lisa will be on with another message tomorrow morning. She will be reading from the Science of Mind textbook. And she and I talked on the weekend about it, and Reverend Lisa promised to intersperse some more commentary in instead of just reading whole passages out of the book, but put some commentary in, split it up, makes it more interesting. But with that, I'm going to say adieu. I'm going to say auf Wiedersehen. tot straks, tot ziens, and everything else, ending with namaste. Take care of yourselves.